On this episode of Murdered by Mommy, we are discussing the ongoing case of Noah and his mother, 34-year-old Julia L. Tomlin. Noah is one of 10 of Julia's children. So, what happened and why did it happen? Also, could this have been prevented? Let me know in the comments what you think. Now, Julia Tomlin reported she put her son Noah to bed on June 24th, 2019 at 1 a.m. But by 11:35 a.m. the same morning, he was missing. Yeah. Oh no, he was kidnapped. Send help. Yeah, right. Noah was last seen in his Bayside mobile home village, wearing a diaper and a green and white pajama shirt. So, as you can expect, a massive search was underway by the community, the police, the FBI, the fire department. Everyone's looking for the baby. Everyone's looking to bring Noah back to his amazing mother. I mean, this is a kidnapping, so for God's sakes, let's get this baby home. Now, while people are searching for the baby, Julia, his mother, and another parent who was at the house were questioned at the police headquarters on a voluntary basis for hours. After the questioning, police allowed them to go home. Fast forward, people are searching, the police are searching, and they're mainly actively searching the Buck Road Beach area because, again, something happened. He's missing. Maybe he wandered off. We don't know just yet. But 1 week after the search began, police say they are not looking at Noah's father as a suspect in this disappearance, which is why they have not released his name or any information about him. This right here is when I knew the police knew more than what they were letting on. Because until Noah is found, everyone on planet Earth should be a suspect. So why aren't you looking for his father? Why don't you think the father kidnapped him? There's clearly something we're not being told. But I digress. So who is Julia and where are the other 9 children? In 2010, Julia spent 5 months behind bars after pleading guilty to felony child neglect. Court documents say that her then 1-year-old daughter was severely burnt after Julia sat her down on a hot kitchen stove. Child Protective Services and medics found her then 1-year-old child with burn marks on her back, according to the criminal complaint from the case in 2010. According to court records, Julia told police she placed her daughter on a stove to feed her without knowing for sure whether the stovetop had been turned off after she finished cooking. Tomlin told police that it was the first time her daughter had been able to sit up on her own, so she asked the father, Justin Samuel Jones, to take a picture. She says she became distracted when one of her other children came into the kitchen, and her daughter fell over and landed on the stove, according to the complaint. Tomlin and Jones said they cleaned the girl and put her to bed, but did not notice any burn marks until the next day, according to the documents. The child's burns turned from welts to blisters, but her parents did not take her to the hospital, the criminal complaint stated. Tomlin pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with all of the 5 years being suspended except 5 months. So yeah, she was sentenced to 5 years, but only ended up doing 5 months in jail. Let that sink in. So, as you can imagine, to everyone's surprise, and absolutely out of nowhere, about 3 days after reporting Noah missing, Julia was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of child neglect in connection with Noah's disappearance. Now listen, charging documents indicate that there was some sort of incident that occurred on June 22nd, 2 days before Noah's disappearance. Julia is accused of neglecting 3 different children, ages 6 months to 2 years old and 3 years old. So about a week into the search for missing Noah, police shift their attention from the beach to the city landfill. Yeah, the landfill. At this time, investigators also execute a search warrant on Julia's home and reportedly found Noah's blood on the walls of the bedroom as well as on sheets and a baby's shirt that was pulled from the trash in the home. The next day, investigators sent more evidence to the lab, another fitted sheet, a gray blanket, a blue t-shirt, and a red polo shirt, along with mouth DNA swabs from Julia and two of her children who lived with her at the time. They also sent 3 swabs of suspected blood from a toy chest, their upper wall behind a futon, and the headboard from a toddler's bed. According to the forensics report, 2 stains on the first fitted sheet likely matched DNA obtained from stains on the collar and back of the polo shirt. One of the stains on the sheet and a stain on the right chest of the polo shirt also could have shared some DNA according to the report. It wasn't from Julia Tomlin or the 2 other children in the home. Another forensic report from the same day determined that Julia Tomlin was probably the mother of the person whose blood was found on the stained bed sheet. The lab said it couldn't do a full relationship evaluation because it did not have a DNA sample from a father. On July 8th, the lab received a tissue sample from the office of the chief medical examiner to be compared with the stained fitted sheet, the swab from the wall, and the polo shirt. The lab also confirmed the DNA profile of the tissue sample. Well, we found Noah. The toddler's remains were discovered 10 days later on July 3rd, 2019, stuffed in a cardboard Huggies box at a trash incinerator. You heard me right. Someone put that baby in a box of diapers. Law enforcement authorities said the body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but it was clear that the baby had suffered horrific and severe injuries. In fact, the police officer who discovered the body reportedly testified at a probable cause hearing that the sight and smell of the remains were so graphic and disturbing that he had to leave the scene. An autopsy conducted by the Hampton Coroner's Office reportedly ruled Noah's death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma and battered child syndrome. Due to the severity of Noah's injuries, the medical examiner had to hire a forensic anthropologist to assist with the investigation because investigators only had a fully recognizable left leg and liver. When first examining the toddler, just so you know, at Julia's preliminary hearing, I'm not saying that this is an excuse, I'm just saying what she told the people. At her preliminary hearing, Julia reportedly admitted that she had used heroin the night of Noah's death. Now, we're going to get into some audio. We are going to hear from the prosecutor himself. We're going to hear a little bit of Julia because she does end up entering a plea. And I don't know about any of you, but I have a sister. We're going to hear from Julia's sister, the aunt of Noah, and see what she has to say. But I want to hear from, I think, the chief of police first. Let's go with the chief of police first, yes.
Noah Tomlin.
Authorities say the 2-year-old was last seen at his home in the Buckrow Beach area last Monday. Detectives charged his mother, 34-year-old Julia Tomlin, with 3 counts of child neglect in connection to the case.
The operations branch and the search efforts.
Let's join the newscast, the news conference in progress right now.
The Hampton Division of Fire and Rescue, and the chief of the Hampton Police Division, Chief Terry Salt. This afternoon, Chief Salt will provide you an update into the status of our operation.
Good afternoon. On Monday, June 24th, as you know, Noah Tomlin was reported missing, and we continue to keep those who love Noah and his family in our hearts and our prayers. That report began an intensive 2-level operation, which included a search and investigative phase. The search phase, the search level included 6 phases on land, sea, and air. Included Hampton Fire Division, who's been a close partner through this entire week and ordeal, and local, state, and federal partners. There were 4 independent searches of the area around Noah's home. There were also 2 searches that were conducted at the landfill and at the steam plant where trash is diverted. On the investigative side, we have been assisted by a number of different folks, but particularly the FBI. And I thank Ted and his staff for all the exceptional work that has been done there. This includes agents, technical, and including the behavioral science unit out of Quantico that have assisted. There have been many other partners that have assisted in this. Information gained through the investigation helped focus the search efforts. Conservatively, we've spent over 10,000 man hours on this process. We have been through 1,000 tons, and let me put that in perspective, that's 2 million pounds of garbage, and searched that by hand. The priority all along has been to find Noah. It's with very mixed emotions that we report today that goal has been accomplished. At 8:50 a.m. this morning, a search team located the remains of a child we believe to be Noah Tomlin. Investigators, forensic technicians, and the medical examiner's office are currently processing the scene for formal confirmation and identification. The investigation is also being coordinated through the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, but there's still much to be done. The case will begin to transition to the Commonwealth's Attorney, Anton Bell, and the courts. Hampton Police Division will continue to support. Make no mistake, this has taken a toll on our community and our first responders. It will take time for all involved to recover and to heal. There has been an outpouring of support from the community, not just in Hampton, but from beyond. And we want to thank everyone who has volunteered to assist or who has provided assistance in one form or another. I want to thank all of our partners on the local, state, and federal levels. There are way too many to name here at this press conference, but you know who you are, and we thank you. Your efforts helped us find Noah. Mostly, I want to thank the men and women of the Hampton Police Division and Fire Department. Those who investigated and searched for thousands of hours in the worst conditions imaginable. I have witnessed their blood, their sweat, and yes, even their tears this past week, and particularly today. Their professional dedication and, more importantly, their caring has simply been amazing, and every citizen should be proud of what they have accomplished and what they go through. I know I certainly am. If this tragedy has taught us anything, it has taught us that we are united as a community in the fight against injustice. Noah is the epitome of an innocent victim. He, like all innocent victims, deserved better. The innocent deserve to have our promise that we will do everything in our power to prevent something like this from happening again. They also have our promise that we will hold those accountable who do harm to the innocent. To all of those who care for Noah, our hearts are with you and our prayers are with you. Noah is now in a better place. I'll take any questions.
Chief, the remains you said the crews located, you all located the remains at the steam plant?
At the steam plant, yes.
Will there be any more charges?
That will be evaluated by the Commonwealth's attorney. There's still investigation that has to go on, including an autopsy.
Will there still be searching of the landfill or of the steam plant for any additional evidence at this time, or will crews be wrapping up?
At this time, we're wrapping up. We will be wrapping that up, but we are not excluding the possibility of having to search if some other information pops up, but we're not expecting that at this time.
You know how the body got to the steam plant?
That's investigative information that I'm not able to comment on, but I will say this, that as part of the team effort, very early on, we were able to, through a recommendation from one of our corporals, we were able to isolate trash and garbage that were coming from the various areas of interest. The tireless efforts of our investigators in coordination with the FBI helped us narrow that focus. And so we didn't have to go through everything, but we had to go through that 2 million plus pounds of garbage that were isolated.
Any good condition of the remains?
I'm not at liberty to discuss that now, and they're actually still processing that scene.
Farm still cooperating at this time?
I'm not going to talk about the investigative itself. We're in that transition phase over to the Commonwealth's attorney. So at this point, it's already in the courts, and it would be more appropriate for Anton Bell to talk to that.
I'm not sure if this even falls under that, but are you looking for anyone else at this time?
I'm not excluding anything. All right, with that, thank you.
The remains they were not incinerated. I mean, this is a strange question, but they were not incinerated. Right?
No, we're not.
And was anything else found with these bodies?
The scene is still being processed. Once the search teams located Noah, everything was frozen, and it was now treated as a crime scene and has to go through the formal processing.
Can you say anything about the difficult conditions? We were able to hear how difficult it is to search an area like this, but it's been within a week of searching.
Well, you're dealing with conditions that are high humidity, high temperature. In this case, at the steam plant, they're in a confined space. We're dealing with CO2 levels. We're dealing with methane gas. We're having to monitor those constantly and shut down operations as those rise too high. So we're constantly monitoring that. You're dealing with the emotional part of this. I mean, this affects people. This affects our officers. And, when you get into that and you smell the odors and you're in the midst of everything, and then you realize what you're there for, and you're going through literally millions of pounds of garbage, it takes tolls. We've got officers that have his picture on their card, on the dash of their car. We have officers that have him on our clipboard. You see our picture here that has been with the investigators throughout the whole investigation. At the end of the day, we care. And we want the community to know that. And it really takes a toll. To that end, we have critical incident stress management counselors working with our teams that have been out there and working with those involved in the case. And there are officers who are shedding tears. I was holding one of our employees in arms this morning that was crying. They relate to other cases in their career. They relate to other experiences. They have children themselves. And the community is affected by this. And, we all have to come together and heal. Most importantly, we need to address those who do harm to the innocent.
Chief, the search team is made up of police officers and fire.
Fire is there mainly for safety. Police officers were actually doing most of the searching itself. But make no mistake, the efforts the fire department did, we would not be doing what we're doing without them. There's a whole decontamination process that has to take place. There is a life safety aspect of this. They're the ones that are monitoring the CO2 levels and making sure we're safe. Without them, we could not have accomplished this.
Can you say who found the body and how the body was it in a bag?
No, we're not going to talk any specifics at this point about the investigation. It's moved to the court phase at this point. It would be more appropriate for any of that. With that,
you say it was a police officer?
It was a police officer.
You mentioned that you achieved this goal of being able to find Noah. Can you talk to us about what it's like to be able to say that we found him?
During the planning phases, we had discussions about, what's reasonable from an investigative perspective and then what's reasonable from an emotional and closure perspective about how many hours you put into this. There's no right answer to that. Obviously, you want to do everything you can from an investigative perspective, but this is about Noah, and it's about closure. It's about making sure that, his life was respected and that we can bring closure not only for him and his family, but for the community. And so we actually were planning on pushing beyond what was investigatively reasonable to find closure. And fortunately, we found it within the investigative process. So thank y'all very much.
You said the 10,000 hours, is that everybody or Hampton Police?
We've been listening to Hampton Police Chief Terry Salt announcing that a police officer, as part of a search team this morning, found the remains of a child they believe to be 2-year-old Noah.
today?
Because I've witnessed Noah bashing his head into the crib. He has spectral autism, and he would throw himself in the furniture. He would hit, every time he went to bed, he would hit his head and hit part of himself into the side of the crib. And the reason why the last time she saw him was at 1:30 in the morning is because she started holding him at night so that he would stop. Because the doctor said they couldn't do anything until he was old enough to be tested for it. She didn't know what to do. And I know Tim Cartwell. He was every bit full of the capacity for evil that you could imagine.
So you're blaming him instead of your
No,
sister,
I'm saying that it was an accident.
So even despite all the blood and evidence that was found inside the home?
I believe that what happened was she passed out from the heroin after putting him to bed, and that she didn't wake up in time, and he tried to crawl out of the crib and fell onto the toy chest that was next to the crib. And what happened was Sammy came in, and that's how it got on his shirt. That's how it got on the side of her, on her wall.
Okay. Thank you,
Well,
Teresa,
not
for your
real argumentative, but she pleaded guilty.
Yeah, wait, yeah, go back.
She pleaded guilty. So I'm not trying to be argumentative.
I don't know what Tim has on her. I don't know.
But who has on her?
But Tim has on her. Tim Carter. Tim was like in love with her as a lord and master type. But he took care of her when she needed him. But excuse me, but you're doing the grocery shopping with her? How the frick does she have 20 pounds of rotted meat in her freezer with 2 toddlers and an infant? Be damned.
Yeah, but she pleaded guilty, so how?
Well, excuse me, but I don't care. Maybe some people are just afraid. She's so terrified because the whole nation is after her. I had to change my name for 3 months. I know the truth, and they wouldn't let me give it. They wouldn't let me tell them what the fuck happened. The police wouldn't listen. The private investigator wouldn't listen. None of her attorneys would listen. Every time I talked to one of her attorneys, they changed her freaking attorney. Every time, within a week of me talking to them, they changed her attorney. Tyrone Jackson wouldn't even freaking talk to me until I called you guys. They talked to me for less than 2 minutes. Still wouldn't listen to what I had to say. It's unconstitutional. Not to mention that because of them not wanting me to testify, it wasn't a speedy freaking trial, was it? Sure as hell wasn't fair.
Degree murder, because first degree murder requires premeditation, and the evidence never could be shown or proven that it was premeditated what she did, and as such she was charged with second degree, which carries a 5 to 40 years maximum sentence, and we're going to be asking for the maximum sentence for what she did.
Let's talk about that. You said it's about 55 years?
55 altogether, with the concealing of a deceased body and with the felony child neglect, which resulted in serious bodily injury. Altogether, it's 55 years that she is facing.
Can you talk about the charges that were no cross, just to clarify what happened there?
Yes. So she was also charged with 3 counts of abuse and neglect because she was, according to her statement, high on heroin when this incident took place. And as such, she was initially charged with that. However, upon further research and looking into the case law does not support a conviction for that charge based on just a parent being intoxicated or high or under the influence. And so I couldn't go forth on that even if I was trying the case. So those charges were going away regardless.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about just how we're finally coming to a point where it feels like closure right after all of this time? You know, trial was put off, all types of things. Can you talk a little bit about how the family and the right thing is finally being done? So
I don't know if I can really say there will be complete closure, because you're talking about a 2-year-old who was taken away from someone who was supposed to be their protector, and instead they were their predator. And so I don't really call this case justice. I would call it accountability, because justice to me puts you back into the same place you were prior to the incident or to the crime. And I don't think you could ever be put back into that situation, because this community mourned and is still mourning the loss of Noah. This community, if you remember, were out for days, all over a week, scouring this city looking for him. We had neighbors, strangers, people coming from out of state coming here looking for this 2-year-old. And to find out that all along, this 2-year-old had died horrifically at the hands of the mother, who had given a story that the child had drowned and that we're all looking for this child, and this child is in a steam plant. And if you remember, that was one of the hottest summers that we had ever experienced. And so the body was decomposing at the very time that everybody's looking, hoping this child's going to be alive, and the child is gone. And so I can't really say that it brings complete closure, but what it does is it's the first step in the right direction for true accountability. And we're going to be asking the court to give the maximum punishment based on her history and based on what she did on that particular day and during that week to this child.
In your statement, you mentioned a man named Tim who helped dispose of the body. What's going to happen to him? Will he face any charges?
So we've always been looking how to kind of close in on charges for him, because one of the things that Ms. Tomlin did is she was very adamant in her statement that he did not know what was in the package. And so that alone gives sufficient reasonable doubt that he could be found guilty of those charges. So what we've always done is we've secretly looked to see if we could corroborate something outside of that statement to prove or disprove what she said. And so that is always going to be ongoing, because to many of us, we just got a gut feeling he absolutely knew. And if he absolutely knew, he is going to be held accountable, just like she's going to be held accountable.
You had read in there a statement to the judge about kind of like what happened, a broad brush. Do you specifically know what ended Noah's life? Can you recreate that?
Well, unfortunately, we cannot recreate specifically how he died, as far as whether she struck him with an item or whether she threw him against the wall, because there was blood on the wall. There was blood on his sheets. There was blood on his T-shirt that was found. There was blood on the sheet that wrapped him up, that she wrapped him up in, and in that package when they found him at the steam plant. So there was clearly a bloody scene. There was clearly something of either an object and I talked to the medical examiner and I asked her, could a fist do this? Could a fist cause this type of injury? And she did say it's possible, given the fact that as a 2-year-old, your skull is still getting harder. As you get older, your skull gets more harder and is more concrete. But as you're younger, is softer. And so it is possible that a fist could have done that, but it would have still been a very, very brutal beating. No question about it. It would have been a very brutal beating. As I read in the statement, the medical examiner once said to me, as we were discussing this case, even in the beginning, she said the injuries were likened to someone falling several stories from a building. So we're talking about extreme abuse here.
So then a follow-up question to that is, what was Noah's life like for 2 years? You had an anthropologist, scientist come in and say that he was not treated well for 2 years. So what was his life like from that perspective?
Well, we can only imagine based upon the science, because none of us were there. So we can only kind of put the pieces together. What we do know, based on the science, is that there were healed injuries of fractures to his skull. What we do know is that part of his cause of death was child battered syndrome, which showed a combination of injuries, a combination of fractures, a combination of abuse. So we do know over the course of that short 2-year period of time, this child went through hell.
You had mentioned when we were chatting before about you would have been happy to take this to a trial.
Absolutely.
Tell me why, and I know that had to be because for the closure of the city and the citizens who were so invested in this.
That's it. The citizens are invested. The citizens wanted a trial, and we were more than happy to go to trial. But I cannot stop. I don't have the authority to stop anyone from pleading guilty. If they want to plead guilty to the charges as they are, they have every right to do that. And the Commonwealth has absolutely no authority to stop that. So let's just put that out there as well. If a person wants to take responsibility, which the defense attorney told me that she was willing to do, I can't stop that. But I think the citizens wanted to see a trial because they wanted to see individuals come in one behind the other to close the gate behind her to show her culpability for what she did.
When you look at your career here as the Commonwealth's attorney, I mean, this one to me really shocked you to your core when you compare to other ones, just those pictures and the brutality of it all. Talk about that.
Okay, so I have done a plethora of cases involving child abuse, child sexual abuse, murders, multiple murders at the same time. This case is probably one of the worst that I have seen, given that it's a 2-year-old that was killed in such a horrific way by a parent. When you think about, I'm a parent, and so you have to start thinking of things in regards to how you're there, that you would do anything for your child and want to protect your child from any type of harm or danger. And just to know that your baby has just been abused horrifically over their short period of life is hard to stomach. And then you guys didn't get the opportunity to see the photos, but the photos are extremely hard to look at. They're extremely hard to digest mentally and emotionally. And so you will hear more at the sentencing. I plan to call the medical examiner to talk about the autopsy because I want to paint the picture for the court. Because she didn't get tried does not mean the court is going to lack detailed information about how this child died. I want to paint the picture for the court so that this court clearly understands what this child went through, how this child suffered, and how this child died.
What are the next steps? I know you all scheduled a date for the sentencing.
That is correct. So we are scheduled for a sentencing in March. And at that time, I get the opportunity to put on evidence that show aggravation. And the defense has the opportunity to put on evidence that they may feel is mitigating. I'm sure one of the things they're going to put on is the fact that she took responsibility for what she did by pleading guilty. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why she pled guilty, to take responsibility. However, I believe the aggravating factors are going to far outweigh any mitigating circumstances that could have potentially existed. We plan to put on evidence concerning the medical examiner. I plan to put on evidence of prior charges that she was convicted of in Newport News some 10 years ago or 12 years ago now. And so we plan to, it's going to be a full sentencing hearing. It's not going to be some short and sweet. It will be a full sentencing hearing.
I have another quick question for you. I mean, we're talking about the prior charges and everything. I feel like the bigger story here is almost a system that failed this child. I mean, Child Protective Services was called. You know, he was still, you know, in her care, and he could still be alive today, potentially, if someone had done something sooner.
No question. The system failed the child. No question whatsoever. And in fact, I had a discussion over email with a citizen who was just irate about just what took place to this child and about the system. And what I had to remind her is I am tasked and responsible for prosecuting individuals who break the law, who are breaking any code sections or law infractions. But I'm not, unfortunately, tasked with custody hearings or tasked with civil hearings that took place that involved either social services or custodial issues. That is not my bandwidth. And so, unfortunately, I can't speak to it because I don't know what happened. I can only say that she should never have had possession of that child. Somebody dropped the ball.
So the story of the bathtub was totally false. You don't believe he was taking a bath. He hit his head. Nothing about that was true.
I absolutely do not believe that he died in the bathtub. I absolutely believe that he died brutally. As I stated in the summary of the facts, there was blood splatter on the wall. So somehow his blood got on the wall of that residence. There was blood on the sheets, on 2 sets of sheets. Somehow it was a bloody scene. And she was able to clean up the bloody scene, but was not able to clean it up well enough for her not to be caught with some of the evidence that corroborated the fact that he absolutely did not drown in a bathtub.
And Anton, the sister came out just before you actually and was trying to say that she was innocent and actually that, that Noah, because of his autism, was banging his head up against the wall and had a theory that, her sister was innocent and, was asleep when all of this happened. Can you just speak to that real quick about, that? What she said?
All I can say is this. When people are not held accountable for small things, it empowers them to do bigger things. And so clearly there was a combination of abuse and behavior that took place before we got to this point of death. And when you don't hold people accountable when they do the small things, it opens the gate for them to do bigger, larger, and more severe damage to society and to others. And so to say that he hurt himself by banging his head does not give justice to Noah. I talked to the medical examiner concerning, is it possible that Noah could have died as a result of falling in the bathtub and hitting his head? She said, absolutely not. She said, this severity of injury is likened to someone falling multiple stories from a building. You will not see this type of injury from someone just falling and hitting their head in a bathtub. Not going to happen.
We can't see those photos that you showed in court, but if you had to describe for the viewer at home watching this, how would you describe the condition of that little boy's body?
You really want me to describe it?
Was the body unrecognizable? Was it decomposed? If you could give us an adjective of what it looked like.
Okay. I don't know if, wow. Imagine a baby with missing limbs, missing body parts, and a skull with just a few hair strings. That's it.
Thank you so much, Anton.
Thank you, sir.
I know, it was horrible.
I want to thank you guys for watching. As always, until next time, feel free to share, like, subscribe. Parting is such sweet sorrow.